Hello and welcome back to the digital platform of Chandrava. I hope you're well. We are back. As you know me, I, Gautam Maji, Assistant Professor as well as Head of the Department of Chandrava of Department of English, back with session number 25. And you know that our department has been organizing the special lecture series since July. So this time we have got another great academician on our digital platform. And you know that because already we have given the flyer. From the flyer, you have got her name. Right now, she is the head of Department of English of West Bengal State University, Professor Dr. Chandrava Chakravarty. So officially, I'd like to welcome our honorable ma'am on our digital platform. So let's welcome our ma'am on our platform. Ma'am, officially welcome you on our digital platform and thank you very much for our invitation because you have given a valuable time for our lecture series. We are really very much grateful to you. So, as you know, ma'am, that we have been conducting this special lecture series to benefit the students, and because in this crisis, when the classes are off, official class, physical classes are off, so the professors like you who have taken these opportunities, rather, we are really very happy and fortunate to have. The great academicians like you on our digital platform to have the insightful lectures. So, if you have few words for our venture, then we'll be very happy with that.
I'm thankful to the Department of English of Sadhan Chandra Mahavidyalaya, Halta, for including me in the special online lecture series that they have organized. I also wholeheartedly appreciate the endeavor made by Gautam Maji, the head of the Department of English of the college, in arranging such a series of lectures to provide the students with some additional food for thought, especially when you know. At a time when normal classes have been disrupted. We are really going through a very stagnant, moribund phase. Um, my topic today is Tagore's The Home and the World, a novel that is included in the UG syllabus of English Honours. This is also something that Gautam had requested me. He has asked me to speak on a topic that is a part of their syllabus so that it becomes specially beneficial for the students. So with that in mind, I have decided to speak on the home and the world. Thank you.
Okay, before our honorable ma'am commences her insightful lecture, so I'd like to share with all of you our academic career. Chandrava Chakravarty is Professor, Department of English, and Director of the Center for Studies in Gender, Culture, and Media at West Bengal State University, India. Her research interests include literature of the long 18th century, 19th century Bengal, gender and cultural studies. Among her recent publications are her monograph Gendering the Nation, Identity Politics at the English Stage of the Long 18th Century, Orient Black Swan, in the year 2013. It was published. Next one, relocating Tagore's Binodini, New Spaces of Representation in Rituparno Stroker Bali, which was published in the IAA Journal of Literature and Librarianship, Japan, in the year 2013. The King and in Rabindranath Tagore's drama, Political Power, re-inscribed in Raja, in the Politics and Reception of Rabindranath Tagore's drama, edition A. Bhattacharya and M. Ranganathan. It was published in the from Routledge Advances in Theatre and Performance Series, USA, in the year 2015. She has edited a volume of essays titled The New Woman in Tagore, The Making and Unmaking of Female Subjectivity. It was published from Sri Samaya Sage in the year 2017. She is also actively involved with the designing of textbooks for elective and core English courses for graduation and post-graduation levels under the prescribed CBCS curriculum of the University Grants Commission in the UGC. So we are really fortunate to have this great academician amongst us. And as ma'am already just mentioned that the topic that she is going to deal in this particular lecture, the topic is on your screen also, the crisis of masculinity, Nikhilesh and Sandip in Tagore's The Home and the World. So after, if you have any question during the lecture, then you can drop your question in the comment box. After her lecture, then I will check all the questions to her and she will answer your questions. So without further delay, I'd like to hand over the entire session to ma'am. Ma'am, the session is yours.
Thank you very much. You can see the topic on the screen itself. It is the crisis of masculinity, Nikhilesh and Sandip in Tagore's The Home and the World. Now, in the recent past, I had delivered a lecture on Tagore's political novels, and I included Gora and Charodhar, but the main focus again was on Home and the World, where he was talking about the home and the world of nationalist thought. Now, I wanted to avoid repetition, although there are areas which kind of seamlessly merge into one another, and it is very difficult to compartmentalize. But here, I have specifically decided to talk about masculinity because whenever we tend to talk about gender issues, it is usually women who occupy the center stage. But we also need to keep in mind that that masculinity and femininity, they are the two poles of a bipolar process. Therefore, it is not possible to talk about femininity without referring to the construction of masculinity. Now, I have divided my talk into three parts. The first is the construction of masculinity in colonial Bengal. Now, this is the historical context against which we are going to place the entire discussion. The second part deals with Tagore's own ideological trajectory and how that has been reflected in Horibare, or The Home and the World. And the last part is a summing up of the salient features of the argument. So, with this, let me begin the lecture. Colonialism itself was a gendered process, which was driven by a gendered force of subordination. Colonial masculinity was a cultural and epistemological project of colonial domination. In general, and as historians of Victorian and Edwardian Britain have noted, the colonial power invested much in cults of manliness, an investment which articulated in specific ways with British imperialism. Masculinities in the colonies were created and perpetuated as a contrast to the colonizers' own masculinity. As Mrinalini Sinha observed, colonial masculinity, a politics that informed both the colonizer and the colonized, illustrates the multiple ways in which masculinity cemented relations of power in colonies. It constituted a hierarchy in which an elite white masculinity presided above both the loyal but simple, martial or manly races and the clever but treacherous feminized or effeminate native men. Thus, masculinity acted as the hegemonic ideology of British imperialism in India. As argued by Krishnaswamy, the cult of manhood rationalized imperial rule by equating an aggressive, muscular, chivalric model of manliness with racial, national, cultural, and moral superiority. A discursive terrain was thus constructed to spread the ideal model of English manhood through the well organized colonial apparatus. As masculinities are negotiated and enacted at the intersection of race, caste, religion, and, and class, nationalist discourse in India relied upon the making of bodies as well as the body politic. A noted study on the psychology of colonialism undertaken by Ashish Nondi shows a language of homology between the sexual and the political in colonial culture and suggests that the British imperial ideology in India was hyper masculine and maintained a rigid dichotomy between the masculine and the feminine as part of the gender ideologies of the post Enlightenment West. The ideals of Victorian manliness, athleticism, and militarism featured centrally in studies of British and Anglo Indian society, especially in accounts of the colonial Indian bureaucracy and the Indian army. You can refer to Mrinalini Sinha for a detailed account. In Bengal, with the rise of nationalist consciousness, a reinscription of the male body as the seat of power, fortitude, and sacrifice became essential. To resist the British discourses of effeminacy imputed to Bengali men. British Orientalists, administrators, and missionaries had played an important role in judging the Bengali man on the scale of British imperial masculinity. Macaulay, for instance, insisted that the Bengalis were conditioned by a soft climate to peacefully accept a foreign yoke. Repeated colonial assertion that Bengali men were incapable of martial prowess because the physical organization of the Bengalis feeble even to effeminacy. This is also something that I'm quoting from Macaulay, authorized their wide acceptance as a non-martial race, as opposed to the Marathas, Sheikhs, Pathans, Muslims, and Gurkhas within colonialist ethnography. Tonika Sarkar observes that in Bengal, manhood was equated with economic and domestic autonomy. That is, control over the process of labor and control over one's wife in the domestic arena. Please refer to Hindu Wife, Hindu Nation. In the latter half of the 19th century, the Bengali elite suffered a loss of its socio-economic autonomy to the British as a result of the Rent Acts of 1859 and 1885. Sorry. A loss of economic autonomy and agricultural revenue was further aggravated by peasant resistance. The elite group suffered anxieties over losing control on low class Muslims and Hindus. The limited scope of entrepreneurship forced the educated middle class to seek professional appointments with the East India Company. Tonika Sarkar notes that the marginal status of these services produced a deep sense of emasculation amidst Western educated Hindus. Their chakri or clerical job reflected their passive and subordinate position in the colonial administration. In the book Masculinity, Asceticism, Hinduism, Chandrava Chakravarty makes a pertinent observation. I'm quoting from her, the perceived crisis in masculinity in 19th century India was not a countrywide phenomenon, but predominantly a crisis of the educated Bengali middle class. Even within the educated Bengali middle class, this crisis, or perhaps the rather widely disseminated talk about this crisis, did not produce a single unified response, but a range of responses. These range from Michael Madhusudan Datta's flamboyant westernization to Bankim's acerbic criticism of the anglicized Bengali as a monkey, a liar, and a coward. Unquote. Such a highly fraught discursive terrain thus forms the historical context for the Swadeshi reincarnation of Bengali manhood, the obvious historical backdrop for understanding the problematic modernities of Tagore's Nikhilesh and Sandip as colonial subjects. However, well, the Indian nationalists, they assimilated the Western construct of virile masculinity with its association to power and activism. And this is well proven by the proponents of the Kshatriyahood, such as Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, Vivekananda, Aurobindo Ghosh, and Bipin Chandra Pal. The martial ascetics of Anandamath, they renounce the domestic and the conjugal in a death-defying bid to serve the mother nation imagined as a female deity, who demands unswerving self-sacrifice from her sons or the Santans. Unlike his guru Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Vivekananda promoted virile Hinduism. He was in tune with the spirit of the age which witnessed the emergence of nationalism. As noted by Krishnaswamy, Vivekananda's hard gendering was locked in a Manichaean battle with colonialism and consequently carried with it all the normative trappings of colonial masculinity. Attributing contemporary Hindu weakness or emasculation to the loss of textual Brahmanism and social Kshatriyahood, a loss that had robbed Hindus of those original Aryan qualities they shared with Westerners, he tried to turn Hinduism into an organized monotheism and admonished the Hindus thus: no more weeping, but stand on your feet and be men. It is a man making religion. I want the strength, manhood, Kshatriya Virya, or the virility of a warrior. These are Vivekananda's words. Within the mainstream of Swadeshi movement too, it was the so-called extremist wing of the Congress, led by Aurobindo Ghosh and Bipin Chandra Pal, that attracted wide attention for its call to militant action instead of sterile speeches. The English daily and weekly Bonde Mataram and Bengali weeklies like Jugantar and Shundha gained considerable circulation and created a lot of excitement. Bande Mataram was very clear about the political stance and objective of the struggle, and I quote a few lines from the weekly. The moderate Indian politician aspires to be an imperial citizen. His loyalty draws him towards the empire, and his politics draws him towards self government, and the resultant is self government within the empire. Now, the Vande Mataram further explicates the nature of his political method and asserts its difference from the moderate faction of the Indian nationalists. This is what the Vande Mataram writes. The old gospel of salvation by prayer was based on the belief in the spiritual superiority of the people of the British people, an illusion which future generations will look back upon with an amazed incredibility. We do not acknowledge that a nation of slaves who acquiesce in their subjection can become morally fit for freedom. Politics is the work of the Kshatriya, and it is the virtues of the Kshatriya we must develop if we are to be morally fit for freedom. The extremists, they were unwilling to accept that the foreign rule was beneficial for them because they believed that the foreign rule should not be judged by the quality of its administration. Rather, it has to be always, rejected because it was illegitimate. The Bande Mataram was also, that is the weekly, it was also insistent in pointing out that the moral force of democratic nationalism had swept Europe in the 19th century, and it was now becoming a universal idea all over the world. So its call for self-sacrifice in the cause of the nation was phrased in most stirring manner, and it says that this freedom from bondage is a kind of a regeneration or a rebirth, and such a rebirth should not come from the cultivation of intellect, but from the fullness of the or by the fullness of the purse or by policy or changes of machinery, but it should always come from the heart by throwing away all that we were into the fire of sacrifice and being reborn in the mother. So this is exactly what the Bonde Mataram says. The enactment of nationalist masculinity assumed, therefore, a public location because it was a product of colonial modernity and the Bengali elites were detached from the cultural connotations of political virility in contrast with the Rajputs or the Marathas or the Sheikhs. This realization somewhere made the Bengali elites a hybrid, oscillating because they were not used to this militant, virile lifestyle. So it was something new, something that they have once again derived. It's a kind of a derivative discourse like nationalism. And they imbibed it, they tried to assimilate it, which of course did not match with their, their usual intellectual or bent of mind. And they remained a hybrid, oscillating between colonial stereotypes and their self identity, which evolved under the influence of colonial power. So masculinity emerged as a site of struggle. Tagore's nationalist consciousness underwent a shift from Swadeshi activism to an avid critique of the movement by the time The Home and the World was published in 1950. This also reflects the shifting nature of nationalist resistance to the British rule. He aligned himself with the anti-imperialist politics much before the Swadeshi Boycott movement had gathered momentum. In 1867, Rabindranath participated in the Hindu Mela. In 1897, he started a Swadeshi Bhandar in Calcutta to promote the selling of indigenous goods. And also, he revived Bankim's Bongo Darshan in 1901 and published articles to underscore the importance of the Swadeshi sentiment of self-reliance. Following the tone of Bankim Chandra, Rabindranath also posited colonial subjugation as the consequence of India's emasculation. In Swadeshi Samaj, published in 1904, Tagore underscored the need for cooperative enterprises, productive labor, and mass education. This is what he writes: the timid feminine forces of society, which hoard and protect, have failed our manly adventure. We are convention bound, emasculated. The truest way of protecting oneself is to rouse one's inherent powers. Again, in Bharatbharsher Itihasek Dhara, he asserted the harmony and spiritual wisdom of ancient Indian society and ascribed a Hindu lineage to India's religious history. Tagore's belief in the value of Kshatriya Dharma revealed the dominant discourse favoring manliness in the late 19th century Bengal. However, he became gradually disillusioned with the Swadeshi movement as it took a violent turn, engaged in loot, plunder, assaults, and killing of innocent people, and also alienated the lower class people, the peasants, and the Muslims. In 1904, Rabindranath disassociated himself completely from the movement and in 1913 composed Jana Gana Mana, claiming that it celebrated the diversity of India and the universal spirit of righteousness. Cynical of the nationalist attempt to replicate Western modernity, Tagore lamented that the abstract being of the nation is ruling India, causing the moral and the complete man to be sacrificed at the altar of the political and commercial man. Patriotism, glorified and blown to a superhuman proportion by the Swadeshis, was to Tagore a falsity which served only the leaders and not the human community. It is not difficult to imagine Sandip simplistically as the embodiment of the degeneration of the Swadeshi spirit into hypocrisy, self-righteousness, responsibility, and self-aggrandizement. Contrarily, Nikhilesh has been viewed by many as Tagore's mouthpiece, an enlightened male patrician who has embraced the progressive values of Western enlightenment, but has not lost his sense of the ground realities amidst Swadeshi euphoria. These are certainly two contradictory models of masculinity, and the text draws unambiguous sympathy towards Nikhilesh. However, it needs to be borne in mind that masculinity in the case of the two male protagonists of The Home and the World was neither personal nor psychological, but responses to the conditions of colonialism. Hence, the concept of masculinity in the novel is temporal, historical, and its enactment are to be seen in the homosocial space of nationalist politics, characterized by conflicting male desires and anxieties. We move on to this is the historical background that I wanted to deal with very briefly, of course. Then we move on to the second part, where we'll see how Tagore's ideological uh, trajectory has been reflected in his political novels. Shumit Sarkar traces the ideological trajectory of Rabindranath as reflected in his political novels between 1907 to 1915, and this is what he writes. The unity of humanist values and socially effective action, which had been Rabindranath's ideal in Gora, has broken down. We are faced instead with the stark Ghore Baide dichotomy of Nikhilesh and Sandip. A casual this is the entire quote. A casual reading obviously suggests that Sandip is the agent from the Bahir or the world who disrupts the home of Nikhilesh. He takes advantage of Nikhilesh's modernizing drives of liberating his wife from the confinement of the Ondor Mahal. The entire project of wife making, which starts with the education of Bimala under Mrs. Gilby's tutelage, culminates in the moment when Nikhilesh brings Bimala to the Bahir Mahal to allow Sandip to see her. The very act of seeing marks that moment of disruption when the morally dubious Swadeshi leader Sandip starts making inroads into the secure precincts of home. The basic narrative line is simple and encourages a complacent narrative, understanding that Sandip and Nikhilesh can be well positioned as binary opposites within the narrative structure of the novel, representing the world and the home respectively. Such a reading is, however, soon challenged as we are confronted with the instabilities and open endedness of the text. Moreover, the division of the Bengali home into the inner sanctum or the Barda quarter, where only women dwell, and the domestic public space, where only men are allowed, complicates the inner outer spatial dichotomy. As Michael Sprinker pertinently notes, the world is not just the domain of political action, but equally the site in the home itself where the affairs of men are discussed and conducted. We are also confronted with two different models of modernity with competing fears and desires, and none of the models can be glorified as perfect or iconic. The confessional accounts provided by both Nikhilesh and Sandip bring out their inner thoughts and reveal their hidden motives, anxieties, self-criticism, and contradictions. It is worth noting that initially the novel only presented the Atmakatha of Bimala. It was later that Tagore decided to add three confessional voices in the novel, thereby complicating the possibility of a neat conclusion. This reveals that colonial Bengali models of masculinity were fractured by indelible differences and contradictions which were bred by the historical conditions of colonial rule. The confessional style of the Atmakatha brings out the process of self-construction and deconstruction that makes Nikhilesh and Sandip the two faces of the same process of modernization that clashed with traditional Indian values and social structures, wreaking havoc both at the domestic and the politico-economic fronts. Heterosexual masculinity, as Morgan observes in Discovering Men, is ultimately articulated in relation to the domination and control of women. It is therefore in relation to Bimala that the masculinity and nationalism of Sandip and Nikhil take shape. Both are men, both the men wish to transform Bimala according to their respective needs. Nikhil for a modern wife, recast in the Western model of companionate conjugality. Sandip in the form of a Swadeshi mate, a queen bee as a source of inspiration, at times erotic inspiration. Um, Masculinity in the novel is contingent upon sexual difference, as Nikhil's quest for truth can succeed only when he can extricate himself from Bimala's enticing influence. And Shandip's status as a champion of the nationalist movement is predicated on Bimala's anointing him the king. And I quote from the text: Then the blessings of the country must be voiced by its goddess. And again, at another occasion, Shundip's impassioned words would resonate through Bimala's veins as he says, I tell you, Nikhil, it is our women who will save the country. This is not the time for nice scruples. We must unswervingly, unreasonably be brutal. We must sin. We must give our women red sandal paste with which to anoint and enthrone our sin. Both the men seem to suffer from a deep sense of inadequacy, while with Nikhil, the sense of deficiency takes the form of a brutal self analysis. With Shunde, the camouflage of France and bombast. The moment of self reckoning starts when Nikhilesh realizes that Bimala takes extra care to dress in order to seduce Shunde. And he ponders, what is the use of straining to keep up my pride? What harm if I confess that I have something lacking in me? Possibly it is that unreasoning forcefulness which women love to find in men. But is strength mere display of masculinity? Uh, much strength must strength have no scruples in treading the weak underfoot? Uh, his introspection makes him realize that his project of liberation was no less patriarchal than Shundip's exploitation of women. And Nikhilesh again writes, I longed to find Bimala blossoming fully in all her truth and power. But the thing I forgot to calculate was that one must give up all claims based on conventional rights if one would find a person freely revealed in truth. Why did I fail to think of this? Was it because of the husband's pride of possession over his wife? No. It was because I placed the fullest trust upon love. Nikhil's status as the family patriarch and landlord aligns him very closely with traditional ideas of Hindu patriarchy, whereas Shondip, a bachelor and a wanderer, lacks the domestic and economic authority which is enjoyed by his friend Nikhil. The novel brings to the fore how both fashion their masculinity, relating it to power and self control, and perceive certain affects or sentiments or emotions as threats to their manhood. I would like to draw upon Ashish Noda's insight into the characters of Nikhil and Shonde under traditional Hindu concepts of masculinity. Nikhil the Brahman is cerebral and attracted to self-denying asceticism. He is the traditional masculine counterpoint to Shonde, the more virulent, virile, active Kshatriya. You can look up Intimate Enemy for detailed discussion. The novel does not posit these two characters as complementary, but oppositional to foreground the deeply contested notions of masculinity. However, as P.K. Datta has rightly noted, the Kshatriyahood of Shondip is also brought under scanner, as the novel turns into a virulent critique of the popular brand of nationalism that imagined the nation as a goddess. Such a construct makes Shondip a divine agent and not an autonomous being. The very idea of religious nationalism brings forth a sense of inadequacy which Shondip tries to cover up through a forceful enactment of desire, as he says, I want, I want, I want. Shondip's monologues clearly reveal a fear of emasculation because he seems to have internalized the Indian spiritual idea of renunciation. And he says, I was born in India and the poison of its spirituality runs in my blood. The doctrine of self abnegation and asceticism is considered as effeminizing by Shondip, who aligns himself with the aggressive martiality of the British. According to Michael S. Kinner, if masculinity is a homosocial enactment, its overriding emotion is fear. I'm referring to the essay Masculinity as Homophobia by Kinner. To evade the fear of other men, Shondip undertakes exaggerated actions and remain ever nervous about gendered enactments. And he says, the important man says, that which has come to my share is mine. And the weak man assents. But the lesson of the whole world is, that is really mine which I can snatch away. My country does not become mine simply because it is the country of my birth. It becomes mine on the day when I'm able to win it by force. Nation to the Swadeshi leader is always imagined to be in a state of war. And Shondip measures his masculinity by man's capacity to win it individually. Nationalist fervor and erotic imagination also blend seamlessly as Shondip flaunts his machismo in his pursuits of women. And this is what he says. Nature surrenders herself, but only to the robber. For she delights in this forceful desire, this forceful abduction. I have found that my way always wins over the hearts of women. Both are who are creatures of this world of reality and who do not roam about in cloud land as men do in idea filled balloons. Women find in my features, my manner, my gait, my speech a masterful passion, not a passion dried thin with the heat of asceticism, not a passion with his face turned back at every step in doubt and debate, but a full blooded passion. Like Shundip's, the nationalism of Nikhilesh is also based on an imaginary that fades. And both men envisage romantic participation of women as an essential component of their nationalism. Despite his sympathy for the poor peasants of Shukshar, the novel also indicates that the peasants and the Muslims consider Nikhil to be an ineffectual zamindar or landlord. However, his fundamental difference with Shondit lies in perceiving his subjectivity as the disciplining of desire and constantly striving and also in constantly striving to understand his true nature through relentless self-examination. In his controlled heterosexuality and marital fidelity, Shondip stands in sharp contrast to the promiscuous ancestors of his family. He believes in the strength of renouncing and lends a moral value to renunciation. As a critic has rightly noted, in positing home as a private site of solitary contemplation and self formation, Nikhil also offers an alternative to Shundip's exclusive focus on challenging the West and the world in the public space place of collective action. But the presence of Ponchu breaks Nikhil's romantic coupling of the home and the nation, as it brings to him the realization that Bimola can never participate in his nationalist projects because she is too comfortably cushioned by the conditions of upper class living. Nikhil's failed modernity makes him turn inward while he tries to save his home from ruin. As the country house is ravaged by the politics of the world, Nikhilesh seeks refuge in Calcutta. Michael Sprinker rightly observes that although Nikhilesh sympathizes with the oppressed peasants like Panchu and the sailor Mirjan, he hardly relates to them in the way Gora does. His position, and I'm quoting from Sprinker, is always that of a landowning patron, and his intervention fails miserably in the case of Ponchu. The author's conscious privileging of Nikhilesh's viewpoint goes against the inner logic of the narrative, weakening it. His critique of nationalism tends to lapse into a tacit acceptance of the colonial status quo. In fact, the last chapters even suggest a demise of modernity. This is quoted from the article The Long Quest for Modernity by Michael Sprinker. Moving to the last section of my uh, talk, which is, of course, not very short again. Here I am going to sum up the basic points of my argument. Whereas the mixed voice of Bimola presents the lack of wisdom and freedom of the colonized mind, the voices of the Swadeshi Shundip and the utopian Nikhil suggest the unfeasibility of both revolutionary and utopian nationalism. Whereas Shondip bases his nationalism on an extremist belief in individual passion and interest, Nikhil devotes his life to the ultimate truth, to complete freedom of mind and voice. These imaginations, however, cannot unlock themselves from colonial knowledge and the traditions of India. Both characters are haunted by Western technology and philosophy. Both belong to the Western educated elite. Both are attached to the colonial in terms of education, administrative expertise, and economic privileges. And both are detached from the barbarian and subaltern tradition. It seems that in their efforts to imagine the nation, neither of them is able to distance himself from colonial knowledge. Given the fact that the home is the original site on which the nationalist project was launched, and secondly, that the survival of the nation depends on the attachment of women, both Nikhil's and Shundip's nationalist projects are tributes to the colonial ideology of colonized culture and society. Their projects conquer with ideological justification of British rule, circling around the degenerate and barbaric social customs of the Indian population. In their acts and thinking, both Nikhil and Shondip express male mastery over females in that they both take their relationship with Bimola as an experiment with their nationalist with the nationalist ideologies. Nikhil encourages Bimala to live in the outer world. He sees her living in the world as a test for her true love for him, the concretization of the highest truth, the ground of his own imagination of the nation, and obviously Bimala fails to be the representation of his ideal woman of the national tradition. Shondip experiences victory when he is attracted to Bimala's beauty. She is an agent who makes him aware of his supreme masculinity and his dictatorship, leading his imagination that is driven by men. Whether a woman is the home or the world is decided by man. And he says that we are men, we are kings, we must have our tribute. Ever since we have come upon the earth, we have been plundering her, and the more we claim, the more she submitted. The fact that the nationalist emancipation is necessarily a story of betrayal, I'm quoting this from Partha Chatterjee's nationalist thought, is another paradox of the national project as evoked by Shonde. He represents betrayal by breaking national myths. In Bimala's eyes, Shondip is not an ordinary individual, but he's a master of life, the concrete form in which the Supreme Being realizes his edification of the world order. And Bimala says that I saw him wonderfully transformed, especially when his features were suddenly lit up by a shaft of light from the slowly setting sun. As it sunk below the roof line of the pavilion, he seemed to be marked out by the gods as their messenger to mortal men and women. It is Shondip who impresses as the creator, therefore, of new myths to Bimala. For example, to prevent Bimala from misunderstanding his glorious task, he assures her that I am your country, I am your Shondip, I am more to you than anything else of yours, Vande Mataram. The magical words, your country, Vande Mataram, Ravana is the real hero of the Ramayana, the truth, the universal aspect, the Ganges and the Brahmaputra, they are all implanted to silence by the voices that could challenge his project. Now, he keeps on, by uttering these words, he keeps on creating new myths about himself. And it is, therefore, it is Shonde whose rank or whose status as a national hero is contingent upon his ability to create new myths by breaking the already existing sacred myths. The context in which he refers to the term Vande Mataram again is secular and wild and worldly. The image of the Divine Mother is utilized to persuade Bimala to steal money for him. Vande Mataram, a war cry taken from Anandamot by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, is made into a mantra and made into a mantra is used in spaces of violence, in bathrooms, in love affairs, in flirting, and in financial cheating. Vande Mataram functions as a magical mantra again in order to evoke violence in the community. Together with the acts of burning foreign goods, the loud repetition of Vande Mataram forces others to join the cause of the nation as imagined and evoked by men. In the parody-like portrayal of Sandip, Tagore challenges the belief that India can build a pure culture based on myths of the Indian tradition alone. Another model of nationalism, evoked by Nikhil, appears to be an ideal one, as it is free from obsessions with colonial knowledge and internal fears. According to Nikhil, the evidence of freedom is the fact that people's voices are based on their personal inner desires. They are the product of internal motivation rather than the external preaching about the colonial and about tradition. The utopianism of Nikhil, his belief in religious tolerance and ethnic unification, remains ineffective whenever he has to deal with the political, economic, and religious animosities that are created and strengthened by colonial involvement with local issues. This situation summarizes the miserable fate of the colonies, whose imagination of a nation is hard to judge on its validity because of colonial legacies. The novel The Home and the World does not thus offer a concrete form of the nation, but only a possibility. And Tonika Sharkar says that the home and the world imagines a transgressive nation in which, and I quote from Tonika Sharkar, the Muslim must not be made to accept the burden because of a Hindu landed leadership commands it in the name of a Hindu goddess. The nation cannot be elevated above poverty and ignorance. The nation is not above universal laws of morality and justice. The nation cannot humiliate the Muslim beings nor impose the burning of cheap foreign clothes. Sarkar's words are indicative of the fact that the novel does not solve the question of what nationalism should be about, as she reiterates that neither Nikhil nor Shodhdev appears as the complete and perfect manifestation of the nation as indicated in the home and the world, because both remain losers. So it is better to read these characters as two possibilities or fragments of the correct image of the nation, a concept that, in the words of Tonika Sharkar, does not find an ultimate and perfect form in the home and the world. Thank you.
Um, First of all, the thank this very word would be very insignificant to express my gratitude to you. I think we are really very enriched with this lecture, and as if you have any question, if anyone has any question, then they can drop the question. Though we have got several messages that they like your lecture as it should be, but no question, particular question, I cannot find in the comment box. So I think either they are typing or something that they will ask later. But whatever happens, if they ask
Okay,
questions later also, then I will forward the question to you, and I hope we
yes,
will get answer, and I will
sure.
forward to them also. So, okay, this is Sangeeta Haldar is saying, thank you, ma'am, for this valuable information. Nida Konar is saying that the cultural, social, intellectual background has been well enunciated. So, she has stated. And
Thank you very much.
so, ma'am, thank you very much for delivering this insightful lecture on our digital platform. I think that our students really have been benefited by your lecture. And next time, I
Welcome.
do hope that next time, if we invite you, we get your valuable time like this one. And we will keep disturbing you in this way. And I hope that we will get you a favorable time. So thank you once again. And I'm taking you off
Thank
from the screen. And you stay happy and safe now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So the participants, thank you very much for joining this session. This is number 25, and our next session, session number 26. The session number 26 coming tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the evening. Today, 7:30 was the commencement of this lecture of session number 25. But session 26 is going to take place from 7 o'clock in the evening. So do join us tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will have another great academician from Raigad University, Dr. Sanjukta Chatterjee, who is an assistant professor from Department of English of Raigad University, and she will be delivering a lecture on To the Looking Glass. So if you like to get this lecture, then you have to tune in to this Facebook page at 7 o'clock tomorrow in the evening. So till then, tada, bye bye, stay safe and stay protected.